Okay, so we looked at word picture types in comics and how words and pictures interact with one another to create meaning. And they do that in a lot of different ways. We looked at word specific, picture specific, montage, parallel, all those different things. But there's also how pictures and panels interact with one another. If you've ever heard the word closure, closure usually means you bring something to a close at the end. All right. So, for example, when I was talking to the seniors today, a lot of them said we don't get closure anymore because there's no graduation, there's no prom, there's no things at the end of their senior year that brings it to a close. So closure is when you close the space between the panels, okay, and you make meaning. This space is called the gutter. The gutter is the space between the panels. It adds magic and mystery to comics because we have to make our own meaning and we have to figure out what happens in between this space because there's no picture and no words for us. So we take two separate images and we transform them into one idea. We close the gap to create meaning. And you do that naturally. What happens between here and here and here and here and here, right? What's going on here? We do that as we read. All right, so here you have, now you die, no, no, and you see this guy with a weapon and this guy, and then the next panel is just, yeah, and you have to figure out what happened in this blank space. What happened in that gutter? Well, he probably hit him. What makes you say that? Because of the person saying, yeah, you don't see that, but your brain figures that out in this space. So that's what gutter does. Okay, we have to create closure to fill in that space. So comic panels, remember each individual, whether it's a square, a rectangle, a triangle, those are called panels. They separate, they fracture time, they fracture space, and we have to fill in time and fill in space. Closure, closing the gap, allows us to connect these moments and mentally construct a continuous, unified reality because this is not continuous. The hat's on, now it's off. Sun's up, sun's down. Gun, eek. Okay, here it's, 4:07 and here it's 4:10. So because of that, we figure out what happens. Well, you're like, of course, between here and here. If I were to add the sun goes down. If I were to add a middle panel, the sun would probably be here. Obviously, between here and here, he lifts his hat off his head. These are easier ones. If we look at this one, we looked at this one a couple days ago, right? I think it was last week. Here the ship is far away, and then we have person, and then we have a person, and then we have the guy in the ship. What's going on in between these? Are these the same scene? Are they different? We have to figure that out because of the gutter, the space between the panels. Okay, so just like this guy, how is he moving in between all of these? These are 5 different positions, but what is he doing in between all of those? That's something that you try to figure out. So I'm going to go through different examples of this. Just like we had different examples of word picture combinations, there's also different examples of closure. All right, so our first example of closure is moment to moment. That is when only a moment or a couple moments pass by in the gutter, in the space between the panels. All right, so eyes open, eyes closed. That happens very quickly, right? I'm blinking a ton right now. If you were to have a panel of me with my eyes closed like this, and then a panel of my eyes open, that would be moment to moment. Okay, here you have Saturn getting closer and closer and closer. Not much happens. This is the easiest one. Okay, it requires very little closure. There's very little that we have to do here. This is also an example of moment to moment. You saw this page a couple slides ago, and you also saw it in the book 1 battle assignment. The battle is very fast paced, and that's part of the reason why there's a ton of panels, a ton of pages, and there's no words to focus on the action. So this is moment to moment closure. Right here, when you have the sword breaking, that's 3 panels for just one little small action. That's moment to moment. Action to action, though, is several moments. Okay, so you have the guy waiting to swing, and then after he swung, what happens in this space? He swings. Swinging is an action. Therefore, this is action to action. Okay, pouring, slurping, burping, okay? 3 different actions. So this one is action to action to action. Similar to here, Beowulf sitting down, he's eating. Action, action. So the way that you can identify this one is to think about what is the main action? What's the main thing that's happening in this panel? Okay, Beowulf sitting, Beowulf eating. Action to action. People looking at each other. Action, action, action. Okay, the third example is subject to subject. This is when you stay within the same scene or time, but you go back and forth between different objects or things in the same scene, all right? So we have the guy, the girl, the phone. This is all one scene. What more could go wrong? Well, at least Jerry never called. Ring, guy, girl, phone. 1 subject, 2 subject, 3 subjects. Okay, a subject is usually a person, place, or thing. Person crossing the finish line, timer, clicking the time. Okay, these are happening at the same time, but you're getting 2 perspectives of the same scene. So if we were in the classroom, okay, there maybe would be a panel of me teaching, all right, and then there would be a panel of Elise smiling, and then there would be a panel of George grabbing a leaf, okay, and then there would, be a panel of maybe my desk just chilling there. All different subjects, people or things within the same scene. Subject to subject. Oh, okay. Grendel, Beowulf, Grendel, Beowulf. Back and forth between 2 different beings, subject to subject. Grendel, Beowulf, Grendel, Beowulf. Okay, notice how there's no action. There's no actions taking place between here. It's not moment to moment. Okay, it's looking at a close-up of their eyes in the same scene. Same scene, different people, different beings, subject to subject. These kind of get harder as we go. You'll notice that. All right, so the 4th one is scene to scene. This is when either time or place changes. Okay, we transport ourselves across significant distances of time and space. So here, he's in Bombay, Paris, New York. Okay, these also look like different people, right? So we have completely different scenes in each one. So we could probably say that this is both transporting time, but also transporting place. This bottom one is just transporting place. No one could have survived that crash. Sniff, you're right. Meanwhile, so it's the same time, because meanwhile means it's happening at the same time, but different places. So here we have scene to scene because it's the same time, but not the same place. All right. So if we were to take, a picture of my classroom at the beginning of this semester with all of you in it, and then now if someone were to take a picture of it being empty, that would be scene to scene. It's the same place, but different time. Okay? Or if I were to take a picture of myself right now, and then whatever one of you is doing right now, okay, that could also be kind of scene to scene because it's the same time, but it's a different place. Okay? It's not subject to subject because subject to subject has to be the same exact scene. And this would be different scenes. My home is different from your home. All right? Scene to scene. Okay? We have Harriet being dedicated, and we're right outside, and then we have Grendel in his living place. Completely different scenes. Okay? This one, we're outside the mead hall, and then we're inside. And then we're outside. And then we're outside. And then we're outside, and then we're inside. Okay? We're going back and forth between outside and inside. And also time is passing, right? Because Grendel's moving. So there's also that idea of scene to scene. So time and space. Aspect to aspect is when you have panels that focus on a place, idea, or a mood. They're not necessarily chronological. They're not this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens. All right. Their panels are pictures related to some sort of idea. So the aspect here is Christmas. We have a Christmas tree and Santa. The aspect here is a nice day. You got the sun, you got this guy laying down, and then you got the birds. Now, I think that, you could argue that this bottom one is also subject to subject within the same scene. guy looking up at the sun, and then, birds as well. But the issue here is you got clouds, he has leaves on his shirt. So maybe a better option is this is aspect to aspect, and it's just nature. The aspect is nature. You got a nice sun with trees, you got a guy with leaves on his shirt laying on the grass, and you got birds and clouds. They all relate to the aspect of nature. Okay? Maybe you would have a panel. Let's keep it the same structure. So maybe here we'd have Lizzo, right? Here you'd have Taylor Swift. Here you'd have Beyonce. So that aspect would be female musical artists. All right? So we don't have any examples from Beowulf yet. They're coming, but we don't have any right now. So this is an example that last semester's class actually took. They took these pictures when I made an assignment. They had to go around the school and create their own versions. So this, you could say, is also Christmas or winter. You could say it's winter plants even. So our aspect would be winter plant, okay? We have this tree, and then we have the poinsettia, okay? All right, and then the last one, remember parallel word picture combinations when the words and pictures didn't seem to go together at all? Well, this is the closure version of that. It's non sequitur. It's when there's no relationship between the panels. You're like, what the heck? How do these two images, these two panels relate to each other at all? All right? How does this guy with a really large mouth saying cheese relate to a tree, relate to fish? How does this guy with a large nose with peace signs and balloons relate to this abstract image? There seems to be no relationship at all, okay? And sometimes when you're reading a graphic novel like Beowulf, this happens at first. It seems like there's no relationship, and then later you understand and you can go back and you see the relationship. So that happens here. When we have this image of the men sending the men who'd been killed by Grendel, right? They were kind of sent off into eternity, and the stars represent their fate. And then the next panel we have is like this ship. And it's like, what? What's going on here, right? How did we go from this like interesting image of boats with bodies on fire and the constellations and these men to like the ship coming and then this guy? Like, what's the logical relationship? So at first it appears non sequitur, but then when we turn to the page, Beowulf arrived, and then we're like, oh, they actually do have a relationship. And this relationship would be scene to scene. But at first, it appears non sequitur. All right, so we have moment to moment, action to action, subject to subject, scene to scene, aspect to aspect, and then non sequitur. Those are 6 types of closure, how we as readers get to create the meaning of the text.